Good morning from Switzerland. Hello, everyone, to the Broncolor studio. My name is Urs, and I have just a few logistical problems to be solved before we instantly talk to David Lund, who joins us from the UK. Actually, just two things regarding questions. You can ask questions anytime during today's webinar. I think it makes a lot more sense that we can really discuss certain aspects while we speak about this or that subject, and don't save your questions for the very end. I will only receive the questions that my colleague Ramon is passing on to me, and then obviously I will ask David to answer them. Before I forget it, at the very end, so when we finish the webinar, you will be redirected to a questionnaire. We will ask you for some feedback about today's session. We will ask you as well some input, what you would like to see in future webinars. Okay, but as I said, that's it. Let's say more or less from my part. It's less from the Broncolor studio, but I would like to hand over to David. May I ask you, David, to introduce yourself? Welcome to this webinar, and thanks so much for doing this.
No, you're welcome. Real pleasure. I think a lot of people know me for my work, for my liquid work, but just a little bit of a background. Yes. So I actually studied graphic design for 7 years. So was a graphic designer, then an art director, had my own design business. But then approximately, time goes so fast now, but I think approximately about 15 years ago, I went to a Hasselblad demonstration, and with no intention to buy one. And then within a few days, I owned a Hasselblad, and then started buying lighting, and then rented a studio and hid away for 3 years and taught myself lighting. So it was a very dramatic. I fell in love with it. I just fell in love with it. So that's kind of in a nutshell, sort of the background, how I got into it.
Okay, very cool. And when did you start? When did this happen? When did you fall in love with cameras and lighting?
Do you know, I think I'd always had a camera. I'd always considered myself a photographer, because it was always part of my work. But there's kind of, it's a bit like being an athlete, and you kind of do a bit of everything, but you then realize you want to specialize. So you've got to really home in on, say, what it is you're doing, and change the way you're learning and who you learn from. So I have to say, lighting, when you don't know anything about it and you're used to just using on-camera flash, it is a steep learning curve. I think I remember one weekend shooting over 1,000 shots of a watch, trying to work out how to light things. I did come across Carl Taylor, his teaching site, and he was immensely helpful. Really transformed my understanding. And I think it was that stepping back and understanding the physics, the principles, that then, you know, once you've understood the principles of how light works and the different sort of techniques, you can then solve problems as they come along. But I did find it frustrating, to be honest, because I approached a lot of photographers and no one would share anything. It was very secretive. And that's partly why I'm quite open, because I think, gosh, you know, it's I would have really appreciated more local photographers. So that's why I tend to be share anything that anyone wants to know anything. I'm quite open with it. But yeah, Carl was a bit of a star, to be honest.
Okay, so it was not a classic, you didn't join a university for school or an apprenticeship like I did 100 years ago.
Okay. No, nothing like that. I mean, I like I said, I was a very good designer, and I was passionate about design. You know, 7 years, quite a long time for studying. But I was always an image maker. So even today, I'm not sure I would call myself a photographer. I would possibly use the phrase image maker, because, you know, these are all tools. The camera's a tool, the lighting's a tool, the gadgets, you know, I mean, I remember Carl once saying I'm a bit like a mad scientist, because, you know, sometimes there's just smoke trailing off the table and there's all sorts of things, dry ice, and there's all sorts of things going on, which is a big part of the fascination, because it feels a combination between playing and discovery. And in commercial photography, you've always got to invest time in developing yourself, developing your skills.
Right.
You don't really get to a point where you think, oh, I'm trained, I now just work. You know, that's
Absolutely, yeah.
that's
No.
part of the fun.
I unfortunately still experience this as well. I have a certain experience, but still I go to the studio and then I don't understand anything. But with the many years, yes, sometimes you find the solution somewhat faster than you found the solution like 20 years ago.
Yeah.
When you mentioned watches, you mentioned advertising photography. So these were the areas you started your photography career with, or this specialization in liquid photography. When did this happen? Is this just recently, or was it from the beginning on?
No, it was quite early on. I started having meetings with agencies, including Saatchi and Saatchi in London. And I remember them saying your liquid work stands out. I think it's a couple of things. One is you've got to enjoy the work you do, the area of work, and let's be honest about it. Photography today it's a bit like, you know, saying you're just a photographer. It's a bit like saying someone who runs the marathon is the same as someone who does shot put as an athlete. They're completely different. So, you know, I found an affinity with liquids that I found fascinating. And I would find myself just, gosh, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, and I'm still trying to, like, play with this chemical or this thickening agent. Or so when you enjoy it, it makes a big difference. But I did at first, obviously, just cover a broad range, which is actually really important. It was a guy called Tim Wallace, a friend of mine, a very, very good car photographer. He said, you've always got to be able to photograph everything, but you've got to be known for something. So I just found a natural affinity, a connection, and also an understanding. So what I find shooting liquids very intuitive. The way they're lit, the way we even can control them, the opaqueness, the translucency. I find it very intuitive. So therefore, it's not hard work, and therefore more enjoyable.
Yeah, I think you think it's not hard work. If ever I come across a liquid shot, it's very hard work. But talking about this, can you show us some of the work? Maybe it would be nice to see some pictures at the beginning.
Yeah, let's go. This is actually there's some images in this proposal. Just go back to the beginning. So just for your possible interest, your viewers, as a commercial photographer, quite often we get a brief, and then we'll ask to, can you tell us your approach? Can you tell us, give us a little bit more information, your technical aspects of how we would light it, construct it, so on, so on. So some of these are quite in depth and some less so. But this was a typical proposal. So I actually called this the day I fell in love, and I talked a little bit about kind of this Hasselblad thing where, you go to a demonstration and then a week later you spent 100 grand on just
I love the selfie here, by the way.
Say again?
I love the selfie.
Oh, yes.
The portrait of you.
Yeah.
slightly different.
Yeah, I'd need to cheer up a bit there. I think I was a while ago. So this is the type of thing, and then these are some sample images. So the client you never ever want to show things to impress the client. You want to show things that are relevant to their problem. That's a really important lesson I can't emphasize. People don't care how good you are. They want to know, can you solve my problem? That was a very, very big shoot across London. It was both video and still. And I've actually got, just while we're here, I've actually got a few things. So we had to shoot inside the glass. So a lot of this sort of texture and this writing on the glass is actually the etching that's put on the glass itself. But the problem with these glasses, as you know, is that they're designed to be very strong, but they smash, they shatter for safety reasons. So we had to ask the company, Fuller's, to not do the heat tempered thing, so we could actually drill holes and get it professionally cut. And then on here, this is called Opti-White glass, which is really, really clear glass, and that allowed us to get inside, so it looked like we were actually inside the bubbles. Yeah, it was a really fun job. So it was a 3-day shoot, but it was about 6-7 days of practicing, and it was the only time I had a delivery driver come with 150 bottles of beer and say, I've never delivered to someone's house before. But you know, that was all part of the experimentation. Again, just more experiments, testing. This was just an interesting point on this, shooting Coke over ice. If you ever do something like this, leave the Coke to go flat. So I had massive amount of Coke, like 15 liters, and you just let it go, pour it out and let it go flat. So you don't get that horrible froth. And that's one of my favorite photos, which it's actually shot with one speed light.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, really simple.
As a backlight through an acrylic or something like that, huh?
Yeah, it was really, really simple. That was.
It's always like this. In the end, when you solve all the problems, it's simple, you know. But the way going, the way getting there is sometimes it's complex.
Well, one of the things with this is that often people use too big a lights, and one of the things with the Bronco lights, the bare bulb, is actually really useful because you've got such a radial, gradual light fall off. And with liquids, I do have a little. This is something I use as a demonstration, but a glass ball, and I put light behind it, and you can actually see if the light's too big, the thing becomes completely flat, and you can possibly see it like that. But when you've got a small light source, you're actually allowing, due to the thickness of the liquid, a darkness, and that's so key to a good liquid image, that you've got that spherical kind of structure to the liquid. I mean, I sometimes see big adverts, you know, proper big brand adverts, and the liquid just looks hideous because it just looks like it's laying flat. It's like flat as a pancake. So that was. This was just a combination of lots of really simple liquid shots with a little hose pipe and my thumb and little gadgets in front, and then merging them together.
Okay, so that's multiple exposure or several pictures.
That's about 10 photos put together. Saatchi were interested in it for a champagne advert.
Okay. Do you do this? Sorry to interrupt. Do you do this post-production all by yourself, or do you have external help for this?
No, I occasionally do, but I think I have a lot of confidence in my own post-production because I think one of the things is I know how I want it to feel, not just look, but feel. And I think, you know, a good image is one that changes how someone feels and it evokes an emotion. I'm very, very hot because of my background on brand, that actually even down to the styling of how we light it and even composition, I'm very respectful. Well, the brand wouldn't do that. I mean, I know some photographers, and I repeatedly say to them, great image, but an art director will know that this isn't real because it's off brand. So this was an interesting product because I did this as a sort of, I was on a plane going to Iceland, Denmark, to do a pitch, sat next to a marketing executive, and he was telling me about this company and what they do. I said, that's just not the right way to do it. When you know you're communicating this beauty, very, very expensive beauty product, I said you want to have a translucent, more of a kind of authentic feel. So anyway, we did a kind of 3-day stint, no sleep. Me and my good friend Hugh Briscoe down in Cornwall, and then I got on the train. I think it was about 2 a.m. Got in London something like, I don't know, 7:30, 8, and then ran to the meeting, and they loved it and they bought the whole lot. But it was completely different, and so for them, they were a new company, and they were also, interestingly, very academic, and they were marketing and understanding, expressing the marketing from the mindset of scientists. But that's not going to work, you know. So it was a really successful campaign. Did a lot of work. Again, just liquid examples. This image here, which was part of the promo for this webinar.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think a lot of people know how it's done. It was a very satisfying project because the client wanted an album cover called Waterfalls, and they wanted it to be colorful. But I didn't want to introduce ink and paint because it can look good for about 2 seconds, and then you lose the clarity. I really wanted a structured image that had color, almost like a glass sculpture. And I suddenly, this was such an amazing moment, because I just suddenly thought, well, hold on, when it goes in, those air bubbles are reflective. So why do I use colored gels? And that color should bounce off. So I did a few tests and it worked. And I kind of thought, and that is very, very satisfying when you've, I mean, it's probably been done before, but when you feel that you've resolved something by inventing something. Yeah.
You mentioned before that, can you go back one, the one before? Yeah, exactly. So you said you're very happy sharing. So may I ask you something?
Sure.
Personal interest. Let's say that the orange and the purple, these are reflecting lights. These are not backlights through the object or through the liquid. So these are actually in front or on the side, or where are they coming from? These the colored lights.
Yeah, I actually did a live demo of this with Carl at his studio, and we did this exact shoot. And all it is broncolor lights, cones, and then colored gels on those lights. So the light that's been pushed out is already colored. One of the important things is with it is that there's some colors that naturally merge into another color more seamlessly. So you know, blue, purple, red, orange. That's kind of a nice transition of color. So you can see what we've done there.
But they're coming more or less from the side, let's say from a 90 degrees angle from the side, or even from frontal, or.
Well, the thing is with liquids, you always illuminate it, but when you've got so much texture, that's actually that bubble is 3-dimensional. So you can actually light from the front or slightly from the front, because that's still going to hit a surface that bounces light back. So if this was the product, if that was the water, and the camera's here, we've got a light probably 20 degrees to the front.
Oh, really?
And
okay, that close.
Yeah, 20 degrees, sort of 20 degrees. So camera's here. We've got not to the side, just slightly in front, and then also two directly to the sides, just behind. So the idea, these lights actually sort of merge into one another, and then a base light at the back, like blue or cyan, just to help illuminate everything.
Exactly.
And then then the harder, and then of course the harder the light, the more closer you can't get the light in, the harder the highlights. And sometimes just put a slight diffusion in front, depending if you want something more elegant, more feminine, and you want these colors to have a little bit more of a softer feel. So it's an interesting technique, but it's very easy to do. Just put colored gels in front of lights, and the water, the air, the bubbles actually create a spherical mirror, because it's actually bouncing off the inside of that bubble, not the outside.
Right. Okay. Of course.
Okay.
Yeah. Nice. Thanks.
this was something for Epson. That's great. Just a lot of this. I have a piston system which I kind of made. So a high-powered air compressor goes in, a release, all sorts of different devices go on here. It's very, very powerful, very powerful. It's surprising how much power and oomph you need to lift weight, even like 2-3 pounds of paint. So I bought these, and I kept buying larger and larger and larger pistons.
Okay.
But it works really well. Really well. And it gives quite a
the result
thump.
is amazing.
Yeah, it gives quite a thump, and then you sort of attach all sorts of different things on it.
Okay.
This was early on in my career. I had a job from Shell, which was a fantastic project. It was slightly amusing in that they tripled the budget, because I was working with an agency, and they said, "Why is your budget so low?" And this is a kind of a little bit of an intro into realizing the value of commercial photography. And even after tripling it, they wanted to put another 5K on it, and I said no. I actually felt this is wrong. Now, afterwards, I wished I did, because they were great to work with, but I just realized this was probably the best way to say it, was a very intense, demanding project for 5 weeks to create 3 images, sort of 8 a.m. to 1 in the morning, without a day off for 5 weeks, with a conference call every day making changes. So it was a tough job, but yeah, one of those jobs where you have a big studio in London, and there's a lot of art directors, copywriters, the agency, and there's just so many people there, and you've got a mountain of fresh fruit, and it's so much money being thrown at it for the client. And then you're there on your own, dribbling, it's not oil, it's actually water with food coloring. So I use an industrial type of thickening agent, but for your audience, this is just as good. It's called Thicken Up, and you just need to be very slow and careful sieving it into sort of not boiling water but warm water, and it just keeps water transparent, but it gives it a thickness and a weight. And then the food coloring, it's funny because I think I brought out every piece of food coloring in the area, and then we had 3 drums of 3 different colors with these prepared, because all those air bubbles have to come to the surface, so we had to allow 3 days for it just to sit there. So when we did use it, it was nice clean liquid. So again, problem solving, but great
how
job.
can you manage that? Let's say on the top right, oil or liquid photograph turns very dark on the left, like dirty oil.
Because
how can you control this? This oil looking liquid gets dark on the left.
Sure, that's not one image, so that's 30 images composite together.
Okay.
So
good. Okay.
So the first drum is really dark, second one okay, then last one light. So you're literally making, it's very much, you've got to have a jigsaw in your mind. You've got to sort of be, okay, I know how this is going to look. I want that to go there. I'm going to want splinters. I'm going to want little bits flicking off, little drop. So in your mind all the time, you've got to perceive it, and then you're just creating those different pieces of the jigsaw. But yeah, big job.
30 photographs. 30 pictures for what?
3 photographs, 5 weeks.
Wow, amazing! But yeah, they look fantastic.
Thank you. I did a lot of stuff for grants, which was interestingly in this. They were quite surprised because I created the background images. So we did a whole series of these, and each one had their own bespoke background image, which is not something a photographer would normally do, because it's kind of an art direction design thing where, you know, I realized there are times when I have to keep the design aspect quiet. I did have an agent for a little while, and she said art directors can sometimes just be a little bit insecure. I've never really found that. I found them all okay. And the other thing is, you know, the advice I was given is to always provide these flat, and I never did, because I always believe give more than what you're paid to do. So that image there, those glasses could be moved about, and the glass is totally transparent. Now, the value of that to the client is huge, because they don't need multiple images. And actually, if they want a shot, for example, that box there, they can just switch it off.
Okay.
So that control of keeping that glass on, you know, transparent piece of glass at the top working, that's it's quite a lot of technical expertise there. Just more liquid stuff. Okay. This was an interest. This is again an example of research and development. An assistant of mine, we spent 2 weeks just experimenting, creating, you know, we've all seen these kind of things before, but I wanted to try some other ideas. And what I found that was helpful was using full fat milk, or rather cream. And the reason cream works really well and adding ink is because the fat in the cream creates a natural barrier to water. So it means that when you pour it, it stays together and holds the structure longer. You know, after 5 seconds, of course, it sort of dissolves and looks mucky. But you've got that magic moment where, you know, I don't know if you can zoom in on that. I don't know if that's zooming in. I'm zooming on my screen, but there's, on this bottom left image, there's tiny threads of detail. And that comes from when you're pouring the ink in, not mixing it, just allowing almost imperfections where you don't mix it, or and keeping the cream cold. It's all sorts of little things you learn. And then bottom right one was hilarious, because we started filling balloons with powder and M&Ms and all sorts of things and exploding them.
That's so fun,
and messy, really messy.
We have a question. Can we go back one? Just a logical question. Can you read the question as well, David? Do you see them?
Let me have a look.
No. Okay, David, I can read it for you.
No, I've got it.
Exactly.
David, do you shoot these very close to the final colors? No, it's completely artificial. It's completely, for example, the blue image, I think, might have been red. Do you know what? I tend to use blue as a color often, though, because it has a wider color gamut. You'll find if you shoot something and you've got to change the color of that, like red, for example, is a nightmare. Changing the tonal depth. Blue is very forgiving. I think the color space is just better. So yeah, there is a behind the scenes video which I'd be happy to share, or share a link to, that shows how we did this. One of the keys to it is that the little funnel that goes into the water. It's so important that it drips into the water and doesn't hit the water, because if it does, that creates a vortex. So lots of little technical things. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Just a question from the guy who we made the external webinar with before, from Claude Bossel, the one about watches photography. What type of ink do you use? Is it acrylic ink or?
Do you know, I use the cheapest ink. I bought some really expensive ink, and I found it didn't work very well. And I bought the cheapest ink I could buy on eBay. I think I've got it here. I haven't got the actual ink, but it was something like £1.50 a tube. But food coloring, but expensive ink is not generally not good because of the. I actually contacted the company that make the ink and was trying to get in contact with their sort of chemistry team, but you tend to find the cheaper it is, the better.
Okay. So it's simply water-based in the end. It's water-based ink.
It is, yeah, it is, because you find that acrylic, I do use acrylic as well, but you find acrylic, you've obviously got to water it down to get the fluidity, but you'll find that if you don't get it right, it becomes very bitty and horrible. And of course, what you're after is something that's silky smooth. And I thought I bought, there is some paint I use. I might remember it in a minute. There's a children's type paint I use, water-based paint, which all of my chocolate work is all done with this water-based children's paint.
Okay, very cool.
Yeah.
We have one more question just to empty here the question section from Gary, who works with liquids as well. What water tools, anything than the obvious, do you use? Do you have, or would you consider indispensable? So what are the most important tools to control water for you?
Gosh, do you know what? It's just every job is so different. I use my drill a lot. Let me just show you an image, just to give you an example of. Let me just share. So, for example, that image there, and this really illustrates and highlights how you have to innovate and try things. Now, people need to always remember that they see an image and they might not appreciate the fact that you spent 4 days banging your head against the wall trying to work out how to get it. And the solution for this one was these very, very cheap champagne glasses, plastic. Yeah. I drilled a hole through them, so there's a gap just enough for it to come out, and they're filled up enough. So obviously, when you then have a drill, that the force pushes them out, the liquid out, and that's how I created that image. So some cheap champagne glasses. But then the other side of it is, excuse that. Okay, and then the other side of it is that one and that one. This one was used with a drill with a brick cutting section here. Now, the reason I use this is because you can actually mask off different sections. And when you do something like this, what you always do, of course, is have the camera, so you can composite, you have the camera locked down solid, and then every shot you can then composite so it has the same perspective. But some of these had little tiny holes, some of them had big holes, and that's how that's done. So it's completely trial and error and experimentation.
Yeah, every shot basically you start from zero and try to find the best solution to control.
Although I have to say it comes quite quickly now. I think I've invested I've invested so many years. It's almost like a Rolodex in your head. You think, that's the solution I can use, and then perhaps develop it. But you've got a good starting point.
Okay, and this picture as well. So the material as well has nothing to do with chocolate, I guess. So that's the children's paint you mentioned before.
Yeah,
it's paint.
Just paint, children's paint, water-based paint. Yeah, and it works really well. It has I had a shoot for Rolls-Royce once, and I knew they were going to come along with some emulsion paint, black, and I deliberately bought this version in black because I knew this would work. Because it's just silky smooth and has a lovely shimmer to it.
Very, very good.
I'm trying to remember what it's called. I do buy a lot of it. Yeah, and then there's this image here.
The one we talked about before. Yeah, exactly.
Cool, but and this one here was similar, but I actually put a sponge around the object, so it's soaked in paint.
Okay. Yeah.
And then as it spun, the force of it actually forced it out, and that's how you create those thinner splinter kind of threads of paint. And it, the idea that it's supposed to be like a sort of an ice cream type of advert.
This leads me to one of the question I have here on my list. I mean, do you have, generally, do you have somebody cleaning your studios? Because your studio after a shoot must be a mess. Or in general, do you work with assistant? Or is this like a one-man show? You are in your studio 4 days trying to find solutions? Or do you work with assistant? How does this happen?
No, it's every job is different. Every job has different requirements. So I did a job for Bailey's, and I think we had there was something probably about 12 people. There's probably, I think on set there's probably about, I think maybe 5 assistants. I can't quite remember, 5 assistants. So you've got someone, I mean, you give them jobs. So you might have someone who does nothing, but okay, here's a tray. Well, I've done that. They clean it, and there's always about 4 trays. So you're never slowing down. And this person is responsible for providing the liquid. So you give people specific jobs to be very efficient. I did a shoot for the world's most expensive diamonds, and on there we have a gaffer, we had a makeup artist, we had the director of the agency, I had two additional assistants, I had a camera assistant, a second camera assistant. So some of these things are, but there are other jobs where I've just done it on my own. Because depending if it's explosive or complex in that sense of there's lots of different scenes to capture, a lot of kit, that's fine. But sometimes it can be as simple as, let me just show you this. And I'm sure you've all seen this type of thing. I don't know if you can see that. So sometimes you're just trying to get oh
yeah, okay, now I see it.
So sometimes you need something like that, and you think, well, you need about 4 foot square space. You don't need to get and sometimes it's just you just want to be able to think and slow it down and reflect and try a few different things. I have to say that every shoot I rehearse. And part of the reason for that is, one, I feel a responsibility to the client to do the very best job. Secondly, it's surprising how when you do rehearse, however simple, straightforward it is, you think, actually, this could be handy. And then thirdly, it just means the performance when you're delivering on the day, it is more seamless.
Yeah, okay. Very good. There was just a question coming in that goes together with what you just showed about the water. Do you have problems with calc in your water? Do you use distilled water, or is it just tap water?
It's tap water, but it's heavily purified. So, for example, I have a big purifying, sort of almost like an aquarium purifying tank, but I don't have any of those sort of chemical things in it. It's just fibers. Because what we're looking for is not, we're not trying to change chemicals. We're just trying to remove particles. So often that will be going through for 2 days. And there's also a chemical you put in, very standard chemical, that it just binds any parts. And you tend to find it lands in the bottom and you can hoover them up. There's also something else I did use for a while, which is called an ozone, and it changes the molecular structure from 2 parts oxygen to 1. You need to be a bit careful with it because I think it can be quite dangerous in a enclosed environment, but it means that no bacteria can grow. But in general, just good quality glass. I prefer oxy-white glass. It's not always necessary, but yeah, water, there's always bits in it, and it just it's horrible. Yeah, always clean it.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. So we had a lot of insights now in your liquid photography. Just to change the subject for a couple of minutes,
Sure,
what else
sure.
do you shoot? Let's say when you go on vacation, do you have a camera with me? Are you into landscapes? Do you shoot portraits? Let's say talking about the professional life, but as well your private life. What else do you shoot?
Well, I mean, I have a personal passion for fishing, and if I ever am working too many hours, I go out. So I did go to New Zealand and on my own, and I decided to travel down the west coast. Every river, I would photograph it and then fish it, and that took me 3 weeks, and it was amazing.
Okay.
Then I hired a helicopter to get some shots of the glaciers, so that was fantastic. But I also do a lot of humanitarian work, so I'll go to the slums of Nairobi, prisons in South Africa, some prisons in Europe as well, all sorts of different things. So that's it's not always easy. It's quite challenging, but that's something I kind of, and it's a complete swing of the pendulum from the technical studio aspect.
Yeah.
But I have to say, I try not to take a camera with me because I find I go into work mode. Like if someone says, "Oh, can you take a photo?" Suddenly I'll go, "Oh, hold on, you need to come over here, and can you move that?" And I just, you
can't stop it. Huh?
You go. It's almost like a dial. You go work mode.
Yeah.
And they go, "We just want a little quick picture." I say, "Oh, let's just get some lighting in it." So,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Good to hear that. But commercially, you do other, let's say, non-liquid commercial photography still nowadays?
Yeah. I do product, still life, advertising shots. I do a lot of sports-related stuff. I've got a couple of clients. Ron Hill. I do actually have. I think it's in here. It's not in here. There's Ron Hill I used to do a lot for. They're a running clothing company. And that was interesting because there was that lovely combination for myself of this is an image making. It's a still image, but there was some 3D pulled in. There was some kind, there was a very, very heavily composited. But I think I do really enjoy the problem solving. Lighting is so key, and it's interesting that the change in my lighting over the years, it's become simpler. So where I've got a light here and a light here and I want this, I actually realize that I need to just structure the object with just maybe just 2 lights to keep it feeling structured. Otherwise it starts looking artificial or flat. Yes. So can I show this behind the scenes? Is that okay?
Absolutely, yes, of course.
Yeah, let me just show this. And sorry we can't remove the sound. So you get the idea there. That was a cool. Really interesting project because it required so many shots, but the essential thing with it was that the lighting remained consistent relative to the images, so that you didn't get any unnatural kind of lighting. That was one bare light, one color light on a Scoro pack fired at 10,000 a second. So we got really, really sharp images. And then a softbox that 1x4 softbox that worked as a catch light on the top surface textures. It was just those two lights, but that bare bulb underneath, that was diffused, but then the blue gel. But that is where liquids. It's so important that you start off with a small light source to create that spherical shape.
Very, very cool. We are already start talking about lighting a little bit, but there were two questions actually coming in from Kerry. They both are going away from lighting. They are about your lenses. To protect your lenses from all the mess, are you using long lenses? Are you going far away, or you protect them? And where do you focus to? Because you can't. There's nothing there to focus to. Where obviously it's manual focusing. So where do you put your focus? And what kind of lenses do you use?
I mean, I think I have about 6 or 7 Hasselblad lenses, but the say for example, the macro 110 is quite popular because I'm looking for detail. And so if the camera's here and this is the width of the object, let me just use this for an example. Okay, camera's here and this is the width of the object. Where do you put the focus? You don't put it here at the front, and you put it, my raw thought is 1/3 from the front. Now, depending on what you're photographing, if it's at an angle, I use a tilt and shift, so I can actually get more depth of field. But with liquids look awful when the front isn't in focus. So anything that's the most forward, if that's not in focus, it doesn't work. Now, you could get away with that with a car or a certain product, but liquids, it doesn't. So when I'm shooting liquids, my point of focus is maybe just an inch from the front maximum. If I'm shooting something else, it's about 1/3. People generally...
So you would accept some unsharpness to the back, which
well,
most of the time is hidden anyway.
Exactly, but also it can kind of connects to the way we think. It evokes more of a natural, authentic image. If everything's sharp, we don't really respond to things being precise. We respond to things that feel that they're telling a story. Or so sometimes, I think a lot of my stuff, because it's liquid and very composite, I do need pin sharp images. Otherwise it's just a big blur. So I always use the Scoros at 10,000 a second, and I've got 2 of those, and the Satos is also super fast, and you've got the color temperature aspect as well, so they're good. But lens wise, I'm a big believer that you have your kit, use it. If it gets mucky, obviously you do your best to look after it, but I always put an acrylic sheet with a hole in, and I put a protective blank glass filter on the front.
Directly in
if
front
there's
of it,
something flying around. And
just for personal interest, you said you're working on the Scoro with 10,000 of a second, and maybe on the Satos even with a shorter time. This, however, does not provide you with hundreds and hundreds of joules, and focus stacking for you, I guess, is a no-go. Can you work with higher sensitivities? So how do you work around the depth of field? I mean, you need a certain aperture.
Yeah, I mean, generally, I don't like to go above f/19 because, as you know, particularly with jewelry, you'll start to find those pixels become, even with Hasselblad lenses, which are amazing, you start to find those pixels haven't got the quality. FA is probably that gives the cleanness, but what I'm doing, which is very conceptual, so because it's so conceptual, I don't need to worry so much about color and all those other things that other people might need to. So I do have my tilt and shift, which I use occasionally, but like you say, I have to get it. If it's an explosion, you've got to just got to get it in camera. But the I mean, I have shot bottles exploding, but then I've taken multiple shots and taken different bits of the glass, different bits of liquid. And I mean, compositing is very common today, and it's something that I actually enjoy. And in my mind, I know that, okay, this glass exploding, I need some 3 or 4 fractures. So I'll actually deliberately weaken the glass in areas, so that those kind of hairline cracks will be points of weakness, and it will. Wow. And of course, the other thing is, if you shake a bottle, that pressure, it takes less for it to actually. Yeah.
Crazy. Yeah, unbelievable. So this was the technical part. Now we have a question coming in regarding your creativity. I mean, all the pictures look different. You have a different approach. Do you get a creative block sometimes that you go to the studios and what happens today? You know, that you don't have the picture in your head ready. Does this happen to you, or do you?
Definitely. No, it's definitely.
Yeah,
I mean, I think one of the things about working for yourself is, I mean, all my staff are freelancers, so you know, sometimes you need to bounce off someone. One of the so I do have a group of people, good trusted colleagues and professional friends in the area, so we all sort of support each other that way. But one of the things I do, which helps, gives me alignment for what I'm doing, is create a mood board. So say I'm doing something for Coca-Cola, I will actually, although Coca-Cola's brand is quite bizarre because it changes globally so much, but let's just take Coke for the UK, for example. I look at all their adverts, I'll put them together in a page and then print that out, and I'll have that constantly on the wall, so I can actually, every decision I make, I align with, you know, even down to the type of slush they use,
with the skull,
Yeah, so mood boards are really important before you start shooting for, I don't know, a DIY drill company or this, or a car or fashion. Look at what they're doing, because they're doing that for a reason, and that's their baby. So don't go doing something else, because that's actually going to maybe not offend them, but they're going to be worried. Well, what are we going to get?
Yeah, cool. We talked about, or you mentioned the packs already before, where the short flashes are coming from, and you mentioned as well something about light shapers, that the longer you do it, the simpler your lighting becomes. So, do you have like a particular favorite light shaper, the light shaper of every shot? Is there like your favorite baby?
Yeah, definitely. The 4x1 strip boxes. I've got
4x1. This is this is the 30 120.
30 by 120. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Good. That's
30 by 120. Yeah. They are brilliant. And the thing is with those strip boxes, you only, I mean, if you've got a product, you don't always have to stick your softbox in the direction of the product. You know, by actually tilting it, you're increasing the distance of the light from the top to the product to the bottom. So you're creating a gradient. You also can, I've sometimes used it so it's so side on that there's just a sliver of light that's hitting it, and I can give a really nice edge key light. But for me, those boxes are, I've also got the longer ones, what's that, the one I've got there, 30 by 180, which I've got 2 of those, which are fantastic. So without a doubt, I mean, I've got altar boxes, I've got parabolics, I've got a lot of kit, but it's funny how 9 times out of 10 you
end
kind
up
of
there in the end.
Because I like my
I love them as well.
Yeah, well, I like my light to roll off. I like a highlight, and I like quite strong lighting, but I like a roll off, and I find that's very easy. Sometimes I'll put a scrim just directly in front of it. So if the light box is this, I'll actually push the light box dead on the scrim. So actually that light source is a solid line, but then it's a complete fade off, which works very well for beer, wine, product shots.
Right. Okay, good. With all the tools you have to control the liquids, is there any chance that you make location shoots, or are you shooting at the client's place, or is always the product coming to the studio?
No, I generally practice here. It's all about making life easy for the client, making the client look good and reassuring them, and making it, and also London is, so a lot of these clients come in from abroad, so it's a convenient place. So often, I mean, I hire the Works, a WRX studio in London a lot, and they're very good, big studios, and it's easy parking, and so those sort of things where you're putting the client first are key. But all the rehearsal, the practicing, all the technical stuff, it's done in sort of the studio here. I mean, and I've got a wealth. I mean, I've got a room that is racked floor to ceiling with gadgets and different light
I can imagine,
modifiers.
yes,
I mean, it's absolutely, it looks like you're walking into a photography warehouse.
No, that's why I'm asking, because you can't take everything to
you
there,
can't.
so
No.
you really have to know what you need.
Yeah, and I've also, one of the things I've learned is when I pack down, is only what's left I take. So I actually I don't think, I might need that. I actually remove it. So by doing that, you think, right, everything's needed is in the studio, pack that down in the car, travel, you've got what you need. The one other bit of advice I'd give is, when people do shoots, take photographs of your lighting, because it's surprising how you think, oh, that was a great image. How did I, just those little things about little techniques. So I always take photographs of every setup.
Okay, right. I'm just checking the question again. We have one from Carl. Probably
Carl
not
Taylor.
our Carl. Yeah, I'm not sure if it's this one. It doesn't say. Hi, David. Do you have a tip on how to select and mask transparent liquids in Photoshop to composite multiple images part of a new image? Any tips on this?
That doesn't sound like a Carl Taylor question myself, but
could be. It doesn't give the family name. Yes.
Okay. So how do I transfer a liquid image into a composite? Is that the?
Do you have a tip on how to select and mask transparent liquids in Photoshop to composite multiple images part of a new image?
Yeah.
When changing, for example, the background in post, the transparent parts often look messed up.
Yeah. So I mean, so you're very much lighting it. This is one of the things where I do my posts quite often, because I light in a way knowing that the steps that are going to follow. So I'll light it in a way that, okay, I deliberately want a clean edge around this, so I can just easily select it. And then and I'll have a background color that is, so often maybe it's black, and then I'll just basically mask it in, but I'll set it to screen. So anything that's black disappears. It makes it transparent instantly, and you're just left with the highlights. If it's something like, for example, let's say Coca-Cola, which has a very sort of quite a deep, rich red, you tend to have those colors in the shot, because you just can't, when you start trying to change the hue of these things, it doesn't look right. So I do try and shoot as close as possible to get the elements, and then I cut them out, and then use liquify, fading, and just mask them together very carefully. A bit like in the behind the scenes for that shot. There's, I think there was 200 images. It's a time. It takes a lot of time. Yeah.
Can imagine. Yes. We do have one more question. Question. Do you shoot the stills only, or are you busy with videos as well? How is the balance between the two?
10 years ago, I would say video was, wasn't required that often, maybe 1 in 10 briefs. Now, stills are constantly wanted, but they're playing a part alongside motion. So a campaign, for example, the Fuller's London Pride, there was 7 still images, but there was also a video, because a lot of the billboards are such high quality in broad daylight. Why would the brand want a still image when it can have motion? But still images have a strong part to play. So more often than not, it's a combination, because we need this for that and we need this for that. And so rather than what a brief being, this is the brief, it's actually, we've got 6 different parts of the brief that need fulfilled. So motion, yeah, there is a part of that, definitely, without a doubt.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So the question window is empty right now. Anyway, we are coming to an end here sooner or later. So if you still have questions you would like to ask David, please use the chat window right now. Before I forget it, when we actually finish the session, you will be redirected to a questionnaire. So again, feedback about this webinar, and as well some wishes or input regarding future webinars. What else would you like to see? So please stay with us after we finish it. David, you already showed us a lot of your tools and secrets behind on your table. Anything else that we have to see? Anything else you must share with us?
Well, I think there were a couple of fun things. I'll just show you. I just saw a comment about the sound, so apologies if someone is having problems hearing.
Okay.
So, I mean, again, I'm just going to throw a few things at you. I mean, things like, things where you see, typical plumbing things where you've got a stack of ice or maybe pieces of fruit and you want to release them. I do also use electronic solenoids, if that's the right word, where you can just electronically release things. This was actually shown to me by a friend. This product here, it's just for cleaning desks, but I use it on a shoot for, if I just show you the technique, maybe if I go this way, you might, with the black background. So if you want to frost it, I wish you could hear the crackling.
Okay, yeah.
But it gives
so just liquid air that freezes it, huh? Yeah.
It's really cold. Yeah, I think you'll get frostbite. And then it starts just going away. But it leaves that lovely icy sort of tiny little texture that looks very authentic.
Yeah.
And then with slush and everything, that works really well. This was one of the images I did do, which is on the site with coloured lines. A few people asked me about. This was from IKEA. I think it was £1. Okay. This is a drill bit, and then it goes in the drill, and you're just pouring water in, spinning. So I show this just to demonstrate how it doesn't matter what it is you use. It doesn't have to be. I mean, I guess if it was in front of the client, you might put a bit more effort so it looks a bit more. Right. But this is the point. There's a lot of experimentation that I do, and something else I've come across lately is this company down in Dorset, and they make this sort of ultra black and ultra white paint. But again, it's this light absorbing material where, particularly when you've got something set up and you just want to make sure that that's not shown. So these things tend to reflect light or actually absorb light. So they're not just colors. And I think I mentioned to you earlier about the black, that this special light absorbing material. One other thing I've mentioned, which I'm always surprised how few photographers use these, is polarizing sheets that they put in front of the actual light. By turning, you can actually say, if you're shooting a glass, a beer advert or something, and you've got a flare, these are really, really, really good, because you can sort of have a polarizer on the camera itself, you can put these directly in front of the light, and which
you use
changes.
both. You use one in front of the light, and then the glass one, the high quality one, in front of the camera. You use them both.
You don't need it in front of the camera.
Okay.
You just put it in front of the light. And the way it works is because the light rays are bouncing all over the place. And what polarizing does, it actually, it's a little bit like a laminar flow liquid. It changes the liquid particles from going all over the place to they become even and directional. But these are really, really useful. So, I mean, yeah, there's a whole wealth of gadgets and bits and bobs and things like I always, these are go-to absolutely. These hand polished acrylic ice cubes, but they've got quite expensive now. They're about £50 each.
Wow. Okay.
And then there's sort of like this stuff I've been experimenting with. It's totally transparent, but it's like rubber.
Okay.
So it's quite good if you want to. I did a Coca-Cola encased in a block, and then had liquid nitrogen over the dry ice over the top, with this rotating. But it is gin clear when you sort of mold it, and then you can cut it. But this Encaps OK, this is called. The company actually sent this to me for free, which was nice of them, just to play with. So again, these things are all little gadgets in your toolbox. And then, of course, you always want your shotgun cartridges.
The dangerous stuff,
which in all seriousness you do need to be careful with, but are blanks. But this is how I quite often explode things. A great deal of care is taken, because there's surprisingly something even that size. We often have to take the gunpowder down to about 1/10. So
wow. Okay.
Yeah, they are. They're that punchy. So you can see all sorts of things. I mean, another thing that's very handy is where was it? It's basically nanotech. I don't know if you're going to be able to see this. Where this plate here has been treated. Let me put a little bit more water in here. This has been treated with nanotech. So basically, the water doesn't stick to the surface. It's trying to be repelled. But can you see the shape that's created by the liquid? Now, the other aspect to this, which is nice, is that because the adhesion to the material is so much less, it means that when you want to, say, for example,
okay.
So this is one of those things where a back massage thing. So this nanotech stuff. I mean, it's really good. There's different companies out there that make it. Some much better than the others, but it has its place. Yeah. But again, you've just got to try these things, build things up, and you end up. I mean, I keep meaning to write a book and just put them all in, because it's.
Yeah, I think so. It would be cool.
There's just so many. I mean, little things like coffee whisks.
Exactly. I do my coffee with these.
Yeah, and even things like those little bits of wood that you use to stir coffee. They're actually very good for beer shots, because they have an enzyme in the wood. And that enzyme reacts to the beer and actually causes it to froth. So yeah, lots and lots of fun, lots of gadgets, very and yeah. And I always encourage people to share their thoughts, share the things they.
That's really super cool, and that you really took us far more than an hour through all your tricks and all the sharing. Thank you very, very much for this.
You're welcome.
The question, my list is empty, the window is empty, so I think we are through with this. Thank you very much once again, David. I'm very happy to have you on board as a Broncolog Global Ambassador. It's really very, very cool. And yeah, I would like to thank you as well very much for once more for listening to us nerd talk about lighting and controlling liquids, and see you again next month.
It's all good.
Thanks a lot, David.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Cheers. It was our pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Okay, all the best.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
guys.
Ciao.
Thanks for watching.